We ask the person who is struggling. We ask the person who shows the wound. We ask the person who shows he's vulnerable. But the man who holds everything together, they always assumed the strongest person. We also assume he is fine. We just assume it. Because he always looks fine. Because looking fine is the most expensive skill he have learned. There is a pattern I keep seeing in capable man, in man who carry everything. This man is very capable. He is extremely responsible. He is the one who everyone calls the moment something goes wrong. And in a man who carry everything, solves everything, hold everything together, a specific kind of quiet suffering happens that almost never gets named or noticed. This video is for him, and it is also for every woman who loves him and cannot reach him and doesn't understand why. Let me describe someone. His name is James. He is 41. He is the person everyone calls when something breaks. At work, at home, in the family. He shows up. He solves it. He doesn't complain. He stays calm when everyone else loses composure completely. Last Tuesday, James drove home after a day where he solved 4 other people's problems, handled a conflict at work, answered his mother's call, carried something his partner didn't have capacity for. He sat at a dinner table. He was present. He answered when spoken to, and inside, nothing. Not sadness, not anger, a flat kind of emptiness that comes from carrying too much for too long, with nowhere to put it down. He would not call it suffering. He does not have a language for it yet. But there is this persistent feeling. And that in itself is part of the problem. That he have no words, but the problem is there and is persistent. The persistence creates a much bigger impact. So let's closely understand this and understand this human we are talking about, this man we are talking about. Most people notice the behavior. The man who never asks for help. The man who solves instead of feels. The man who is always fine. I became interested in what creates it. And what I kept finding was this. At some point in a boy's life, often young, often without anyone intending it, he receives a message, not spoken, felt in his bones. When you are useful, you are valued. When you are strong, you are loved. When you hold it together, you belong. And so he learns. He learns to solve instead of feel. He learns to manage instead of ask. He learns to hold instead of release. And it works. People praise him. People rely on him. People love him. People love his quality. So he does it more. He builds an entire identity on the foundation of never needing anything. And then one day, somewhere in his late 30s or his 40s, he sits in a quiet room and feels something he cannot explain. Not the absence of success, the absence of himself. This is a lot more at the bone level. This is a lot more at a soul level. You know, we talk to a lot of humans. I talk to a lot of my people who I'm mentoring at the moment. And I keep telling them about consciousness, about mindfulness, about living mindfully, about living in the present, about being able to see every slowest thing at utmost focus. That's mindfulness. So not that absence of success, the absence of himself from this level of mindfulness. He doesn't know when it happened, because it didn't happen in one moment. It happened in 1,000 small moments where he chose performance over presence. You probably already know this man. Maybe you are this man. Here is what happens over years of caring. The body starts treating openness like danger, not as a decision, deeper than that. In the chest, in the jaw, in the specific tightness that arrives the moment someone asks, "Are you okay?" Because asking for help carries a felt risk. The risk of being seen as weak, the risk of losing the respect that his reliability built. So he does the only safe thing. He says he is fine. Not because he is dishonest, because over years, his body learned that showing the weight costs more than carrying it. And so he stops reaching, not because he doesn't need, because he has forgotten that needing is allowed. The more capable a man becomes, the less people ask if he's okay. And eventually, he stops asking himself. The armor that protected him became the walls of his own prison. Let me tell you what this costs. In the body first. The jaw he wakes up with tight. Not pain, just set. The way it has been for years. The shoulders he carries slightly higher than they should be. A permanent readiness that never gets to stand down. He lies down at the end of the day and his body stays braced. Because the brace has become the default. Then there is the numbness. It starts as efficiency. He processes and moves forward. He handles it and carries on. And slowly, the ability to feel begins to follow. Not dramatically, quietly, in his mind somewhere. The joy that used to arrive easily starts arriving less. The laughter that used to be the real starts sounding performed. The moments that should land pass through him without fully landing. And then the resentment, not explosive, the quiet kind. The explosive heals, the quiet stays. A low-grade feeling that he gives and gives and gives, and nobody sees what it costs him. Not because the people around him don't care. That is generally not the case. And to be very honest, they care a lot more than a normal human being, because this human is giving so much. But because he never showed them there was anything to see, strength without emotional processing becomes self-destruction. Slowly, silently, with everyone in the room calling it admirable. Now I want to speak to the woman watching this video. You may love this man. You may be his partner, his girlfriend, his wife, his sister, his mother. And you may feel like you cannot reach him. Like there is a warmth somewhere inside him that occasionally surfaces and then disappears. Like he is fully present and completely far away at the same time. That is not distance from you. That is distance from himself. The man who learned that his value is in what he provides does not know how to simply be. How to simply be with someone he loves. Because being requires presence. Presence requires openness. Openness requires the willingness to be seen. And his body learned long ago that being seen is the last thing that is safe. So he shows up, he provides, he is dependable, and he is emotionally alone inside the relationship he built for the person he loves. She feels it. She doesn't always have words for it, but she feels the warmth that doesn't quite reach her. The conversation that closes before it opens. The man who is never not okay and therefore never fully real. This is how over-responsibility quietly dismantles intimacy. Not through cruelty, not through neglect, through armor that was never supposed to be permanent. Here is the deepest layer. The one most capable man never surfaced. Somewhere along the way, James learned something slowly from the accumulation of 100 small experiences. He learned that he is loved more for what he provides than for who he is. When he solved the problem, he was valuable. When he held it together, he was respected. When he showed the wound, the room became uncomfortable. So he learned not to show the wound, not to be vulnerable, not to show himself as weak. He learned to earn the love he needed to perform. And that realization, the quiet understanding that his worth is conditional on his capability, silently destroys many men from the inside. Not loudly, not visibly. Over years, in the quiet, in the space between one responsibility and the next. Between that is where he depletes. Marcus Aurelius watched this in the man around him. He wrote about it in the mornings, before the court arrived, before the day's demands began. He understood that a man who cannot be reached will eventually be hollowed by the very strength he performs. Not in a single moment, quietly, the way important things always go. So here is what I want to say directly. Carrying everything alone is not strength. Refusing to be seen is not maturity. performing. Capabilities when empty is not admirable. It is a sophisticated form of disappearing. The strongest men I have observed, not the most capable, the most truly strong, learned one thing that changed everything: how to remove the armor without collapsing. Not by becoming weak, not by performing vulnerability as its own kind of performance, but by understanding that the armor was never the man. The man was always underneath it. Rest is not laziness. Asking for help is not failure. Admitting exhaustion is not weakness. It is the beginning of being real. And a man who is real can actually be reached. A man who is real can rest. A man who is real can let someone love him, not just the version he performs. I built the code of living partly because of this, because I kept seeing this problem in men who had done everything right and arrived at success feeling nothing. I realized the problem runs deeper than motivation, deeper than discipline. The link is below if you want to go deeper. James, 3 months in, still carries, still shows up, but he can put it down now. At the end of the day, in his own home, with the person who loves him, he can put it down and still be himself. That is not a small thing, that is the whole thing. If you are the man I described, if some part of this landed somewhere quiet, I want to say something to you that maybe nobody has said recently. You are allowed to be tired. You are allowed to not be okay. You're allowed to put it down for a moment. The world will not collapse. The people who need you still will be there. And the person you have been protecting behind all of the capabilities, he deserves to exist too. And if you are the woman who loves this man, his distance is not indifference. His silence is not coldness. His armor is the language of someone who learned that needing people was a risk he couldn't afford. So he did not become this because something was wrong with him. He became this because something was asked of him before he knew how to say no. Maybe your strength was never supposed to mean carrying the entire world alone. Maybe it was supposed to mean knowing when to put it down. Anyway, that's enough for tonight. Get some rest.